Hi, everyone, and welcome to Birds of a Feather, the mini-cast dedicated to relationship intelligence. On our show, we hear the stories and strategies from industry leaders, and we explore how meaningful connections are the key to our success. My name's Jeremy. I'm co-founder of Feather, and we are offering the Relationship Intelligence Platform. And today, we're joined by Nick Cobb, three-time founder, and has recently launched HoneyBee to define the future of the matchmaking industry. Nick also runs Loyalty Ventures, which focuses on treating rare cancers, and American Dynamism. He built AngelStat, the co-pilot for angel investors, advises for venture capital, and was the global vice president of engineering at VP of engineering and product at Kyte. And prior to that, Nick went through the scrappy startup nature, building one of the world's most prolific companies, Uber, and led their infrastructure and developer experience teams through the IPO. So Nick, I am thrilled to have you here, man. You are what I would call creme de la creme.
Thank you, Jeremy. I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I would say a great blend. Product development, go-to-market, and Martin Mao introduced you and I back when I was building the Velocity segment at Chronosphere. And I knew right from the get-go that you're the real deal. And what I love most about you, man, is just beyond strong depth of knowledge is just your generosity and the genuine support that you have for me and I'm sure for everybody else that comes into contact with you, which really makes you perfect for bringing you on as a thought leader and speaking about relationship intelligence. So everyone that's listening, you're in for a treat. Nick, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, amazing. So I'd love to kick this off, just kind of setting up the stage for the people out there with telling us a little bit more about HoneyBee. How'd you come up with the idea? Give us the deal.
Absolutely, yeah. So HoneyBee came about through, I guess when I left Kyte, I was taking a career break, and one of those people that can't really sit still. I had an idea to build the AngelStat for about a year and a half, and was working on that, basically trying to do go-to-market and figure out, what's the value proposition essentially. And didn't really, essentially land it over the course of last year. But I also was taking on side projects, building, small software solutions for people. And one of my former colleagues from Uber actually reached out. She's a recruiter in the matchmaking industry, so shout out to Regina. And she asked me to build a small CRM for her to replace kind of the spreadsheet-based recruiting that she was doing for matchmakers. And so started out building kind of I would say the MVP of HoneyBee. We called it Lover Girl. And she started using the tool. As she used it, one thing matchmakers do a lot of is share candidates between them so that they can, find a successful match. And as more people saw the system, they started coming to me and asking for their own software. And it turns out they all wanted their own. And so kind of decided to dig in that rabbit hole a little bit. Learn more about matchmaking and started building with a partner. And then from there, that started probably in January of this year. And as of September, we have about 20 customers, growing 30 to 40% month over month. And really excited to be offering kind of the AI-enabled software platform for matchmakers to run their business. And that includes all of the tools they're using for matchmaking, automated, sort of co-piloted by AI, with all the power and things that they can depend on from the technology. And then also the sort of like go-to-market, lead generation, lead qualification side in a CRM as well. So I'm excited to help as many people find connection and be an enabler for other matchmakers to do that.
Awesome. What you're doing technology-wise is great, but what you're enabling for people is amazing. So thank you on behalf of everybody else out there that's going to go and find their special someone. Lover Girl is a great name. I think HoneyBee maybe is my favorite. So congrats on all the success.
Thanks.
As you're thinking about this particular industry, because matchmaking was kind of new to me. I actually had heard about it from a friend of mine. She had told me that was something that she was exploring to go and meet somebody. And when you and I were first talking about it, I like kind of fell to the dormant part of my brain. And then it's like matchmaking. That's really like a thing. That's an industry. And and it is. I'd love to get your thoughts. As you're dove deeper into it, you're talking to more people that are experts in this space. Like, what do you think is broken about relationships that creates the need for an industry for matchmaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think the matchmaking industry, just first off, has been there for a very long time, right? It's probably one of the oldest industries in the world. It's very deeply rooted in a lot of religious traditions and a lot of cultural traditions in various, cultures and nations across the world. And I think the reason it's having this kind of comeback a little bit, I mean, we could accredit it to all of the exciting and fun to watch TV shows on Netflix about matchmakers. But I think the reason is what you're saying. Relationships are a little bit broken. I think there's a couple of catalysts for this, right? We've had this computer in our pocket for 15 years, and we spend 6 hours a day, in some cases on average, staring into that screen, and we've lost the ability to really connect with people beyond, small talk or small conversation. And in some cases, for more introverted people, that's become a safety mechanism. And so, they gravitate more towards disconnection than connection. So I think that's one major catalyst. So, I would follow all the health influencers, right? Get outside, touch grass, meet people, do that kind of stuff, right? To overcome that. But I think the other thing is, because of that computer, we've done all of our sort of interactions through there, right? And dating apps, for the last 15 years or so have been the primary way for people to meet. And they've taken a really transactional nature, like almost where the dating app marketing has become a joke, where they say, hey, well, we're the app that's meant to be deleted. They want you to delete it so many times and come back so many times, And so I don't think that connection's being built sort of in that channel for people to find love, but it's become really convenient. And so that's where people go. And then I think the last thing is that we have basically a generation of younger people who were locked down in their homes. They were basically made to sort of be in fear of, the person-to-person interaction because of the COVID pandemic. And coming out of that was basically in their formative years, right? And so coming out of that, they didn't have the formative experiences that a lot of people have when they're younger, where they're going to parties, they're going to dances, they're going to more structured events that are, hosted on their behalf, so that they can meet each other, so that they can form relationships for the longer term. And so I think we're just kind of like a little bit behind where we should be in terms of, some of that age group. And so managing their interactions, or having somebody help them manage those interactions, I think is something that is valuable to some of those folks. And so we're seeing kind of matchmaking come back into the forefront a little bit, because it is something that helps people smooth out the curve of awkwardness, or maybe introversion, that kind of stuff. And also kind of gets people past another thing we'll talk about, which is like being stuck in the filtering stage, right? It's really easy for us to filter for exactly what we want, because we're used to doing that on our television. We're used to doing that on our computer and everything else. If we want to buy a home, we want to look for an apartment, we want to do anything, we can just set a bunch of filters to find our preferences. And so we've gotten a little bit too much in that world for people. And hopefully what I'm building with HoneyBee can help to kind of repair that a little.
Yeah, it's an important point. And I think you kind of hit on it twofold, which is we kind of expect instant gratification and instant results. The things that we do, and I'm not an expert in this. I've been but I certainly think that like putting in effort creates value, and it creates connectedness to the thing that you're building. Right? Like if you do a puzzle and it takes you a long time, you put a puzzle together, like you feel good about doing it afterwards, right? If you had two pieces and you just connected them right away and they were the perfect pieces, you kind of forget about it. The struggle, the learning is in the struggle, as we say, right? And I think the value comes in the effort. And I don't fear for the younger generations, but I do think this is something to consider, wherein if we're inundated by instant gratification and optionality, things like TikTok, which is fine for getting insights, but there's more and more studies that are coming out saying that it's actually kind of dulling our own ability to make decisions. And I actually think AI is, in a sense, and the automation behind AI and large language models is a bit of a delicate thing too, because if you crutch too hard on asking a question to get the answer and you take the human out of the loop, you get an answer, then like, how connected to you? How connected are you to that particular answer in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
So I can definitely see that. One thing that happened for me recently is I was listening to Simon Sinek, and he was talking to a psychologist, and this woman said, "Hey, like Gen Z needs to learn how to talk to people again." And I was like, "Man, you know what? I've been terrible with going to the grocery store, and as I'm waiting to check out, looking down at my phone and refreshing an app or just screwing around or not." But I've been trying to like pick my head up a little bit more and just say hi.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing what comes from that. And what's really, I don't know if it's the way or the bigger picture or whatever you believe out there, but it creates a better environment for the rest of the day too, if you actually put in that effort. So I think it makes a lot of sense where you've got people in the loop, and you can't have a perfect, we're complex creatures. You can't understand every aspect about everybody. But thinking about this, right? So now you have to balance the speed and efficiency to help a matchmaker help their clients with the authenticity, which is something we're thinking about from Feather's standpoint too. So it's definitely adjacent. And, you as somebody who's building, right? I wanted to maybe kind of tie this back to your experience, right? Because we have all of these apps out there that allow us to go and prompt an idea into a prototype in minutes.
Mm-hmm.
As well as I do, actually probably way better, that there's some breakpoints that happen if you try to go roll that out. But like that makes these ideas. So someone listening to this say, "Oh yeah, matchmaking. I'm going to help automate, matchmaking and help make it better." That product, that idea can be challenged, and the barrier to entry is lower than it's ever been. Sure. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you earn the title as the king of, matchmaking software? Like, how do you create longevity in HoneyBee, and how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, it's easy to go through a laundry list of features and things that could be harder for somebody, coming out and, as you said, like vibe coding, to try to nail those things. But I think there's a lot of power there and a lot of capabilities, like probably more than people are giving credit to. But I think it's not really features. It's not necessarily I think product and design are really important, but I think the main thing it comes down to is doing things that other people won't do. For example, if a matchmaker has trouble importing their data, do it for them, right? Take the time to make sure they have like a great experience, not just like a good or an average experience, like have a great experience every time. Things are done for you, right? You don't have to solve technical challenges. For example, I need to embed this, dating profile form on my website. Can you help me like register a new DNS name? Sure, I'll do that because I want you to be successful, right? And so doing things that other people won't do, I think is super, super important. Don't go too far outside of your box as a startup founder, right? Like you don't want to be doing like all kinds of other, things. Like I'm not going to actually figure out like how to do the screening for the matchmaker, for example. But if I stay, within my technical realm and the things that they need support with, I'm happy to do a lot of things that other people won't do. And it's all kind of like part of customer success, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I had that experience with Gusto recently, where we chose Gusto as our payroll provider. And now, I've hired a couple people, some in California, some outside of California, and trying to set it up. And man, it's something that you take for granted when you work for a company, how complex it is to just onboard a new employee. And they were great. Like they did exactly what you're talking about, just call me to ensure that I had the experience, to make sure that my questions were answered, almost to a point where I was like, okay, stop calling me, I got it, kind of thing. But I think that goes a long way, and not just the, hey, is the tech good, but like, is the philosophy about partnership and customer first mindset good too, right?
Mhm.
So I love that. I guess, when you think of your experiences, and you've obviously had a rich career full of different types of experiences,
Thanks.
was there anything that stood out to you that has been a part of why you think that way, right? Anything that you've been through, like how are the things that you've been through transferring to how you're building and how you're thinking about HoneyBee as a culture?
Yeah. I mean, we all get to where we are because of our community and the people around us. And I think I tend to sort of introspect a lot or reflect a lot about the people that it took for me to have the career that you're talking about, right? Previous managers, my parents, my Boy Scout troop when I was younger, my religious community around me, and now my fiance, right? And so I think, when you think about doing things for other people, that like you didn't get here because of solely yourself. Everybody, definitely puts in a lot of effort and can say like, hey, I worked really hard to be where I am. But, nobody is really capable of doing everything on their own. You have to have good teams around you, good people around you. And I think about all those people that led me down this journey and gave me the opportunity to work on HoneyBee. And it's even the like sort of safety to be able to take the risk, right? And so, I want to do things for other people, other business owners that somebody won't do because I want them to be successful, right? I want to give them the same outcomes that I've enjoyed, and then hopefully that HoneyBee will enjoy, as a result of that.
Yeah, that's it's a common thread for people with high RQ, which they're looking for opportunities to go help other people. And as such, I had a chat with a guy named Brad's the other day, and I was telling him about Feather, and he said, "Oh, so it's like creating a symphony, like an orchestra of relationships. Your ecosystem as an orchestra." So, man, that's good. We got to hire you for branding. But yeah, it's amazing what happens when you go put in effort into other people, whether it's romantic relationships or really just any kind of personal relationship, professional relationship, and speaking of that, as I was doing a little bit more reading and seeing where you're taking the platform, one thing I thought was really interesting was you worked at least two companies that I know of that were building off a marketplace model, right? So you're going to market as the platform for this particular hyper specialized vertical. But you just go and created what looks like to me a marketplace model as well, which I thought was really cool. Would love to hear a little bit more about like the inspiration behind that and how you take you lift the CRM out of the Stone Age and bring it into these more modern business models. Yeah.
I can credit, some of the folks that I've worked with on this from the very beginning. Regina and Amanda have been really helpful. Amanda at the Crush Confidential has been a good partner. But I think like there's a lot of things that happen in the matchmaking industry that are a little bit, I would say shadow, but like not in a negative way, right? Everybody has really strong intentions. And I think for the most part, I see people also treating data with respect, right? Because there's a lot of personal information involved. But the idea was basically to create a sort of secure and audited, historically audited place for those kind of like shares to occur. They still happen off the platform. Matchmakers will share candidates with other people who are not HoneyBee customers, which is great because they learn about HoneyBee. But on the marketplace, matchmakers can post their clients who they're under contract with and maybe having a difficult time matching, either in that client's geo or maybe they have specific needs. And they other matchmakers, we have some recruiters on the platform, which I can kind of talk about why that's important. But the recruiters are going out and sourcing people, and so they also have these available candidates out there. Who are really, looking for love, same as the clients, but maybe they wouldn't find each other otherwise. And the thing that's great about matchmaking is when two matchmakers get together, they can really tease out, the person's level of intentionality, their motivations for wanting to find love, what exactly their sort of end goals are, and help them through a lot of them do date coaching. So they help, what is your vision for the relationship that you're trying to get to, and then how you actually, behave on the way to get there. And so what I love about it is, two people could find each other through this channel, and that first date isn't, sort of like figuring out if they're going to show up on time or if they're going to be, kind of aligned with the same goals and principles that you are. That person arrives, and, you're able to have a really intentional conversation with them because that you're both there for similar reasons, right? And so I think that part is really helpful, and the marketplace helps facilitate that. We facilitate the introductions, we facilitate kind of the proposal aspect of one matchmaker going to another and proposing a match and why they think it's a good fit. And all the data is secured. There's an audit trail, and so everybody kind of is able to enjoy the benefits of having those historical references and that kind of stuff.
It's great. I mean, you're helping architect successful interactions in a lot of ways, right? Like, people's time is scarce. It's are you never, and by the way, if you figure out how to sell, more than 24 hours in a day, we should both quit our jobs and start selling that. But no one has more than 24 hours in a day, and our time is limited on this planet. So the fact that you are creating a system that helps people maximize their time for good. If I was wearing a hat, I'd take it off for you, man. I think it's great. But I want to take a step into another chapter of the Nick Cobb story here and talk a little bit more about Loyalty Ventures. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Loyalty and your thesis, and specifically, because I had to look this up, American Dynamism, right? Like, how'd you come to that? I get the altruism and the vision for helping, especially in the rare cancer side of it, but tell us a little bit more about your inspiration, the firm, and
I'll just say that we're doing less of the cancer stuff. I try to evolve my opinions regularly, and I went through a situation where my dad had cancer. I think I shared that with you previously, and then I also had cancer as a result of kind of figuring out, hey, like, dad passed away, what are my risk factors? And so I've changed my opinion a little bit on cancer in the last 2 or 3 years. I think the medical industry is not doing us many favors there. I think they've scripted a playbook that is driven largely by insurance. And I'm happy to say the controversial stuff here because I'm just very unhappy with how my dad was treated. And so, like, just looking back on it. And so I'm doing less of that because I'm not convinced that the medical industry, biotech, startup industries, like pathways of exploration, are really going to come to fruition in anything other than shareholder value, which is fine as an investor. Like, you can maximize shareholder value, great, but like, I care about actually solving that problem, and it's one of the oldest problems in humanity, right? And so I've changed my approach on that a little bit. But the American Dynamism side, that thesis, largely, it's a little bit of a downstream or kind of adjacent to what A1Z is doing, A16Z, and Andreessen, and really supporting the idea of reindustrialization. And so Loyalty Ventures is a member of the NAIA, New Industrials Organization. We support basically manufacturing, defense, supply chain, and all of the things that are connected to that, with the aerospace, which is the largest kind of area of investment right now. But we also support, we have one company that's doing autonomous, like, ground transportation for the military, right? And so the idea is that we can, create not just more success in American culture through that endeavor, but also create more jobs, create more skills, and bring a lot of things back to the US that we lost over the last 20, 25 years or longer. And so that's, we write smaller checks. We're not a major investor by any means, but we try to participate in those companies in the pre-seed, seed, and Series A stage to try to help them achieve their goals, right? They're taking on these super capital intensive things that are very hard. And if they're successful, like, we all win as a country. And so I'm excited for, all of the endeavors that we've done there. This year, the investing slowed down a little bit because I've been focused primarily on HoneyBee and building that business, but still talking to founders pretty regularly and keeping in touch with folks, connecting them when I can.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree with you on all fronts, and I think a lot is changing, especially, not to go into any bigger, broader political topics, but a lot of stuff is changing, and we need to be ready. So I love what you're doing with that. I'm curious to get your thoughts from trend perspective, or anyone else that's interested out there about the venture capital world. Like, what are some of the trends that you're seeing that you're kind of keenly aware of, both from the venture side of the house, or as a founder yourself, or what are some of the things that you're noticing?
I'm not currently taking investment. I'm not really exploring it. I've had a couple of people kind of chat with me about it, but for me right now, it's just like build the best product that customers want and be successful there. And as the company grows, if there's things that we want to invest in or go, kind of more long term, there are a couple areas to explore, and so that might be an opportunity for investment later. But for right now, I'm the only employee, right? I do the sales, the marketing, the engineering, the product, the HR for myself, when I need to take a break. But I think like from the investment side, we're just not really like exploring it. I would say like the other reason that I haven't been a super active investor this year is I'm seeing just a lot of the patterns of the past repeated. A little bit of froth and hype around, AI companies. There are a lot of companies that are doing really, really well in the space. They're building great products that have, LLM capabilities, and they're achieving very fast revenue. And as a result of that, I'm excited for them. But as a result of that, the investing market has kind of inflated a lot of those deals, and we try to really be capital efficient. We really try to I would say like invest early and get good financial terms, and it's very hard to do that sometimes when you're a smaller investor. And so you really have to pick who are the founders that you want to work with, what are the problems that you want to support them working on, and stay there. And so we have a blog post out on the Loyalty Venture site. Not as thorough as I would have liked it, but definitely wanted to get thoughts out there and just like teasing apart what is really a good product approach for AI and what is kind of the right use case, and our opinion on what that looks like. Myself and my partner Brian, who works with me on that, Brian Bailey. And so I think the market is a little inflated. It's moving very fast. I'm cautious to make sure that I'm not like participating in things that are going to repeat, behaviors that will repeat, the cyclical problems that we've seen before in the last few years. So paying attention, but not heavily participating as much this year.
Yeah, makes sense. I actually just read a post about the frothiness of the market right now too, and it's amazing. I see 200x multiples is just wild. We all know where that went back a few years ago. So hopefully there's some stopgaps for big things to come. But
this has been said a bunch of times, but I'll say it again, like whatever valuation you take, you have to grow into. And so it's exciting to take that money. I think a lot of people get incentivized by how much you raised and not how much you built or how many customers you have, and that kind of stuff. And so like whatever valuation you take, you're going to have to grow into. So you better have a plan to get there pretty quick,
Yeah, absolutely. When you think of just from the venture side of the house, what are some of the challenges? And I know you're saying that it's not the forefront of every day of everything that you're working on, but like you got to see deals, you got to build relationships, you got to build pipeline for deal flow, you got to build trust. You've got a lot of circles of potential influence in terms of people that you can go and interact with. So like as somebody in venture, like how do you think about relationship management in that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one I guess really important thing, and I hope it comes through in all of the things we're talking about, but I think the most important thing is just having integrity with founders that you work with, like being upfront about what you can actually help with and what you can't, and whether or not the check is the most valuable thing, and for that particular founder, and if so, like then be super committed to giving the check very quickly and get out of the way. I think the relationship management piece, like when you're supporting a founder, whether it's through hiring their engineering team, in my case, or connecting them with people from the various stages of, my past career. For example, connecting a founder with somebody at FedEx who's a buyer of a particular product. Doing that efficiently and quickly, and being realistic about like, hey, well, I may have to go find the right person for this exact thing, but definitely the people are there. So making sure that you're just upfront about the value that you can bring, and if you can't, like whether or not the check is the thing, right? So I think that's important. Founders have like a lot to deal with. Having like investors constantly hovering or asking too many questions, getting too involved is definitely it's noise. I think for something it's helpful. It's always helpful to have sounding board as a founder, and right now I'm working alone, don't have a lot of those sounding boards, and so I see the value in it for sure. But having somebody who's hovering there and kind of like maybe sending pathways that are not relevant in the current moment can also be frustrating and can slow people down. So I try not to do that. So I don't know if that answers relationship management question.
Yeah, I think it definitely nails it. And just double clicking on it, right? How do you keep those connections warm and relevant in the times where like you said, like, hey, your head's down, you're the one-man band right now, HoneyBee. Yeah. How do you even find time to keep those connections active?
Yeah, I'll give an example. So last year, I worked with a founder named Peter who's he started a company called Frontier Audio. They're building essentially the headset and augmented, I would say, audio reality, so to speak, like assistive capabilities for warfighters and people who are working on the front lines in the industrial space. So people who have a need for ear protection, but the technology is super outdated. Those people have a lot of hearing problems later in life. They strain a lot on the job to really listen to what somebody over the radio is telling them, or those industries like airlines where communication is just super, super important. And in Peter's case, like we had a connection that we wanted to build at a previous company of mine. And the person was somebody I grew up with, and I hadn't talked to them, in years, right? And you don't want to be this person who reaches out and is just like, hey, transactional, here's my question, and can you solve it, kind of thing. Reach out to them organically, try to, connect with them again. How's the family? Like, what's been going on in your life? Here, oh, by the way, at the very end, I have this thing that I'm working on. If it's interesting to you, I'd love to get your help, but otherwise, it's fine. And I felt like in that particular situation, like the person was super willing to help because we were able to reconnect, quite well. And that's somebody you didn't talk to, right, for quite a while. And on the flip side, people you meet with all the time, friends, you go for beers or you do something else, like it's typically a little easier to engage them and to reach out periodically. But I think one important thing is like be responsive to people, right? And I'm guilty of not being responsive in some situations if I'm very busy or something's going on, right? Just got engaged in June, so like there's a lot of wedding planning happening, for example. And I think being responsive to people and just saying, like, being realistic about where you can or can't help, and just passing through sometimes, being a router essentially if you need to be. So I think those are ways that I try to stay engaged with people.
Yeah, it's key, right? Like putting in effort, even the little incremental and marginal efforts of just staying top of mind, staying connected, finding ways to help. When you think of growing the scale of the amount of people that we know, and I don't know how many people you have in your phone, but I got 2,000 contacts in mine. At some point, they made their way into the phone. It's pretty like overwhelming to think about how do you actually keep all of that going. And that, obviously is something that we're after trying to help solve with Feather. Yeah, it's important, right? Like we need to nurture the relationships and keep those going, because there's so much dormant value that we can create for others, and in turn comes back to us, right? Mm-hmm. And creating that symphony, that orchestra of the ecosystem. I want to go to one more really cool chapter of the Nick Cobb story here, as we're getting towards the end. you were with Uber pre and post IPO, and Uber has been revered as a place where it's minted some of the world's top talent. I'm sure you've heard the term Uber Mafia, right? Like 860 alumni of Uber went on to build startups. They raised over almost $40 billion of funding. They've created multiple unicorn companies. And Uber is a category king, right? It is one where they really created awareness about a problem, and then not just the problem, but built a product that really solves that problem and is really easy to use and very valuable. So it's got that longevity. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about like your experience with building and nurturing internal relationships, because it's not just about who do I know, that can go get me a new deal or a new lead or make an intro to the right person or whatever that is. But in companies where you're building teams, and you've been a senior executive, right? Building a team that has trust, staying connected with those people while you work with them, and also creating continuity and connection into the future, right? It's kind of aligned to what we're talking about. So I wanted to just kind of get your thoughts, I guess, on how you managed internal relationships while you were also juggling the craziness of that whole pre-IPO to IPO cycle.
Yeah. I would say in the first 3 years of Uber, I was very bad at it. When I came in 2014, it was a little bit after, kind of the earliest stage. And so I got to know a lot of the early people, but I didn't really know what I was getting into. And so when I got there, I came from FedEx. It was super, corporate, very business casual. Decision-making was extremely slow. And when I got to Uber, literally first day, it was like, hey, there's this problem. Can you just go deal with it, right? And that problem involved me walking to a hardware store and buying some tools, right? Which I would not normally do in a workday, in my previous roles. And so I think being thrust into that environment was very uncertain. And I had to go through the learning of not over sort of investing in my own idea. I'm somebody who kind of like creates a plan or a vision in my mind, and I'm just going to go execute on that thing. And I even had a manager at Uber tell me it's like through sheer force of will, you get things done. But that comes at a detriment to sort of holding on to the idea too long. And when I was on the mobile team, we had constantly rebuilt the CI system. And I think we were in the third or fourth iteration of building. And I realized, through the middle of that, we may have built the wrong thing here for a lot of the other things that were going on. They were changing the compiler. They were customizing a lot of the repository approach. And I think I made a mistake in how I managed the relationships at that time. And I've talked to a lot of people about it, close friends and also former colleagues, about, how I did that poorly at that time. And what that looked like was just being, too defensive about the idea, clinging to it for too long, and not just being like, hey, let's remediate the issue like super quickly and get people, back to work again in the places where they were slowed down. And so when I went to the self-driving division in 2017, it was almost like a pure problem-solving role where a lot of the sort of ideas that I might have of how to solve something were like blatantly wrong in some cases. And they weren't wrong from the sense of like they were the wrong approach, but that there was already kind of a plan and some goals and things to execute on. And so it became more about saying yes to everything, hiring the best team, and making sure that we execute on the things that we say yes to, right, and follow through. And so I think over time was able to build a reputation of like, we're the team that gets shit done. We do what we say we're going to do, and you can trust us with, handing us the keys to the thing that you're really trying to solve. And where, there was gray area or something took longer than expected, we always try to come transparently with the reasons why. There's a lot of, very specific examples of maybe where that could have been done better. But there's a lot of things where it was done well. And I credit the team and the people that came in to solve those specific challenges for us being able to deliver and execute on that. I was sad that, we didn't solve the problem of self-driving in particular, the infrastructure and developer experience team, I think we did a great job of providing the necessary tools for that. And part of the reason I went to Kyte and wanted to work back on, consumer product was to have more of an impact on the outcome of the product itself. But it was definitely challenging, I would say, in the first few years, for sure.
Yes, and it's a learning lesson, right? I mean, I think we have to be made aware of a lot of these things through struggle. Again, if it was that quick 2 pieces to the puzzle, you wouldn't hold it as near and dear to your heart. And when I met you, you were the VP of engineering and product globally at Kyte. And we were talking about doing a deal, and you had a vision. And what I noticed was that you weren't going to go make a move unless your team was on board with the idea. And we actually wound up not doing a deal together. So, you never signed my my PO, and here we are today, still friends, right? Which is great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the thing that I notice is that you empower your people, which takes a lot of trust. And so I'm curious to maybe just go one level deeper. How do you think about building trust in these internal relationships? Because it's a hard thing, right? You got to hire the right people, but you got to still curate that trust through experience. So what are some of the things that you did there?
Yeah, I would say one thing that I've done consistently across all teams that I've worked with is I typically write this very transparent thing, not regularly, but periodically, and I call it cobbler thoughts. I learned it from a leader named John Thomason, who is extremely experienced and a very good leader, in my opinion. He was at Qualcomm, he was at Microsoft. He's been all over, I think, a lot of exciting companies. And John used to share his thoughts, transparently about like software and things he was really struggling with, or things that he wanted the organization to do better. And so I started doing that as well with my team when I was at Uber, and I carried that over to Kyte as well. I think part of it also goes back to the hiring interaction you have. Like when you're hiring somebody, you find that they're going to be a good fit for the team. How do you build kind of a plan to support them and to make sure that like this is going to be a great mutual fit? And I think really sitting down with those folks and saying like, hey, what are your goals for the next role you take? Learning what those goals are, and then really coming up with concrete ways that over the next 2 years, not some crazy like 10-year period, but over the next 2 years, what are the things that you're going to be challenged to do here that are going to support those goals, right? And if the goals don't match what the company's working on, then maybe it's not a good fit, right? Maybe they're not going to find motivation, or they're not going to be their best self there. But I think building a plan with those folks, and then even if they're not your direct report, sitting down with them periodically anyway and saying, hey, like, I know when you started here 6 months ago, we talked about this. Are you, still thinking about that in your career? Do the things that you've been working on solve, scratch that itch for you? And sort of consistently checking in with individual people. And I think that builds trust, because they know that the person who is, sitting in leadership discussions and all of that kind of stuff is thinking about all the people on the team and what it is that they're motivated by, and who's going to be the person that wants to come solve that, next challenge or the next thing that, the rest of the company might be interested in solving. So I think those two things might be specific examples.
Yeah, it's great. And you make it sound easy, but it's not, especially when you're in a position of power, because everyone in a lot of cases want to tell you what you want to hear. And in some cases hard to, create that radical candor, right? Where they're telling you what's real. So in some cases you're not even maybe getting the echo chamber of reality. But the other part of it is we're time starved, if you think about it. So you have to create a lot of self-accountability and to do what you're talking about. So it's one thing to sit down. I used to do this with my team too, call it the North Star leading indicators. And we go build a plan on what their motivations were. And from a sales perspective, like, what our go-to-market looks like and what activities are going to get you to your personal, professional, financial goals, and use that as a reason to like, hey, let's pay attention to where we're at. Let's use this as the North Star. And we get busy. So how do you make sure that you like keep yourself accountable to continuing to keep an eye on that? How are you tracking it? How are you actually, outside of it just being a random trigger because you saw something that made you think of a thing. What's your system for accountability there?
I'm a little bit weird, I would say. I think a lot of engineering leaders tend to pay attention to things like DORA metrics, productivity, that kind of stuff, and output. And for me, it was all about the product. And the product can be, in many ways, intangible to other leaders in the company. You can say, hey, well, we shipped this feature and that thing shipped on time. And here's how many developer hours went into that, or product hours went into that. But I tend to be like, if we don't nail the experience, we're going to spend extra time nailing it, right? We had a case in Kyte, for example, where we were having trouble really snapping the map to the specific location of the delivery and including, it's a small technical problem, right? But including the route line into the delivery location, right? From the source and consistently updating the map. The team ultimately did a good job with it. But when it didn't behave, specifically the way that, for example, Uber would behave, I challenge them to go back and really fix it and not just do something good enough, but to get there so that when people use the product, they really have an excellent experience every single time. Now, of course, you need to ship things that are good enough so you can move quickly and that kind of stuff. And we did do some of that, but there are certain areas of the product where you're this isn't going to feel polished. And the average delivery experience, for example, is a DoorDash or an Uber. And so if it's not as good as those things, then people aren't going to use it, right? And so that was an area where the intangible saying hey, I really want the outcome to be this, and working with other leaders in the company to say, that's why I'm not working on your thing yet, it is challenging, right? It's very hard. And so I tend to be blessed with this personal, I could say blessed, I guess is the right word, but with this personal thing where, even though I'm heads down, I'm in the weeds of some specific thing, I tend to get these random kind of mental reminders of the other things I need to go do, right? And so I'll kind of execute on everything in parallel. And managing that sometimes to make sure that the quality output is high, even for myself, is sometimes difficult. And so I do see, kind of the North Star and the metrics and that kind of stuff is helpful, but that was not really how I managed in terms of, outcomes in the team and stuff.
Yeah, love it. It gets harder when you go further from your team to your peers and to their teams and to ecosystems, because there's, it's kind of like this, especially in these highly matrixed big companies, or our lives is a good example, right? People are moving in and out of this circle of influence in our life. These are people we're working with actively, investing into right now. And then there's all these other people that either could move in, people that are in might move out. And I think that, at least the vision that I've got is how can you go and continue to keep those exterior circles engaged as well, and not just for what's in it for us, because that's it's really about how do we help other people too. I do love the approach you're thinking about, and this is, again, that's why I was so excited to have you on here. So I'm sure everyone listening, if you're still with us, are pretty fired up too. But with that said, we're pretty much at the end here, and I like to wrap these up with just one key takeaway, one actionable thing that you do that anyone who's listening might be able to implement for building and maintaining important relationships in their lives. So assume that being blessed with the to-do list of who and what and where and why, for a lot of us, is challenging, especially because we're distracted. What's one programmatic thing that you do that you think others might benefit from?
Yeah, I mean, I would say over the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of my friends left San Francisco and I met new friends. And one of the things I've tried to do is when that person has their first birthday in your history of knowing them, I always put it in my phone. And so every single time that they're having a birthday or something like that, I'll reach out to them, even if we haven't talked in 6 or 8 months, because it's personal. It means that you care. And even though, yeah, my system for tracking it is a little bit programmatic, as you said, I do have the intention of them knowing that I'm thinking about them that day, right? And that I wanted to continually think about them. And so I tend to like track things that are important to other people myself, so that, you know, when those milestones come around, I can be there to just cheer them on and support and that kind of stuff. So you'll have to tell me what your birthday is, Jeremy, and I'll make sure to reach out to you.
You got it. I'm happy to do that. I think that's a really important point. It's not about having technology help serve up the information. We talked a lot about this even before we started recording here today. It's not just about technology serving up, but it's about the human making an effort, right? I think because LinkedIn tells birthdays, you could go click happy birthday.
Sure.
Might be better than not clicking happy birthday. But if everyone's same birthday message says happy birthday, comma, you know, Nick, exclamation point, you know where it came from. And in some cases it loses, in my mind, some of the opportunity for taking that next step. And it's hard. Again, time is the biggest constraint for this. But pick up the phone. I try to pick up the phone and sing happy birthday. I probably sound ridiculous.
Yeah, that's
important. Horrible singer, you know. My friend Margaret, I was talking to her the other day. She writes 300 birthday cards a year.
Wow, that's amazing.
Sends them out a month in advance, and she brings joy to people that way, and that fills up her cup, right? And it's not just dopamine hits from how many likes we can get on posts we put, right? Totally. But it does take effort to even take the birthday, find it out, put it in your phone, store a note. And that is, you know, there's a stress point there. And a lot of people are too common and don't do it. But I love the fact that you do. It is definitely a blessing, I would say, for sure, to know you and to have you as a friend and somebody that I can lean on to. So this has been an amazing conversation here. I could go on for a long time with you. Nick, if people listening want to learn more about HoneyBee, or if they're interested in hearing and learning more about Loyalty Ventures, or just rooting you on from the sideline, how do they get a hold of you?
You can pretty much find everything at cobbler.ws. It's just kind of a personal landing page website there. Got all my, you know, connections to HoneyBee and Loyalty Ventures there. Loyalty Ventures at loyaltyventures.vc, HoneyBee with honeybee.com. Support us on social. I'm sort of learning the content game here and doing it probably poorly. So yeah, any support is appreciated. And thanks again for having me.
Of course, you've been great, and for everyone out there that's listening and tuned in today, thank you for being with us as well. Hopefully the conversation resonated. If you've got questions for Nick, drop them in the comments. Share your thoughts on how the learning is in the struggle and the effort is in the struggle, what experiences you've had. And of course, if you're interested in learning about Feather, where we're taking the intersection of technology and authentic effort for building and nurturing our networks and our key relationships, check us out at www.feather.vip. Sign up for the beta test. My name is Jeremy. This has been Birds of a Feather, and we will catch you next time.